Welcome to your in-depth astrology overview and zodiac forecast for week commencing the 18th of August. I'm going to share some standout details with you to look out for to begin with, then on screen the event chart right at the top of the week, which always provides an influential backdrop for the whole 7 days. I'll then go through each of the influences as the week unfolds and then share the zodiac signs from Aries through to Pisces, which you can relate to in terms of your ascendant, sun or the moon. I'm astrologer Patrick Arundell, a very warm welcome. If you've yet to subscribe to the channel, please help it to continue to thrive and do so now. Thank you if you've become a member. Please check out my memberships underneath this video, but thanks too to my patrons as well. Please also visit the evolving website we have at patrickarundell.com. You can download your free natal chart with a stunning interpretation, enjoy your free card tarot, but also sign up for your free daily horoscope to be fired to your device each morning. If you would like to work with me one-to-one, it would be an honour. Please check out my testimonials below to get a feel for what other people have said about that. This week begins with the moon in the bubbly Gemini, but it does fleetingly forge a T-square with the nodal axis. I'm going to unpack that for you, but the ruler of the sign of Gemini is Mercury, which of course has been going through a big retrograde season. Now it's going to emerge from the post-retrograde shadow at the very start of next week, but it's forging a very powerful link with Mars that has lots of positive dimensions to it, so I will share that with you. But we also have the Sun as it comes to the end of its journey in the sign of Leo, with Mercury now in direct motion in Leo. That's given us a chance to think about the creativity or the things we felt passionate about over the last month, ready for the Sun to move into the practical Virgo on Saturday. Now ordinarily it's a great chance to blend form and function, to get things that we're inspired about working in a bit more of a structured and efficient way. But this year, Uranus, the planet of surprises but also of disruption as much as innovation in the bubbly Gemini too, that's squaring up to the Sun as this week goes on, and particularly by the time of the black moon, which occurs on Saturday in the sign of Virgo, and that square with Uranus is very tight indeed. What will that mean? Please stay with me for more. On the screen now I'm sharing the event chart. As ever, we're mindful of the two luminaries. So there's the Sun. It's in the third decan of the sign of Leo, very much about Mars energy, so we're pushing forwards with conviction. But also the moon in the bubbly Gemini there, so you can see at 18 degrees in that T-square with the nodes. So the North Node in particular is asking us to be very much in touch with our instincts. So however much we discuss something, and that's possible with Mercury in such a lively link with Mars, we can really get caught up in the enthusiasm of it. And if we do need to share something, we can do so with conviction, assertion and no little passion. But important to stay in touch with that inner voice. However, if you recall earlier this year, Chiron did get quite battered, the so-called wounded healer, by Mars through its journey in the sign of Cancer. And this week, one of the upsides is the Sun does forge a lovely link to Chiron, just reminding us of where we are investing our passion. Even if we don't always get financial rewards or we don't get plaudits, if it's something that really makes our soul come alive, that's very important too. But then, as this week goes on, we do have that lively link between Mercury and Mars. Let's just think about this. Mercury in Leo can be very much about our attachment to our identity, or in terms of expressing our identity, and therefore can make us a bit prideful. With Mars in the sign of Libra, very much about relationships, but it can be about connections. if we want to share something with someone that we're really excited about, we could get them to take a lot of notice, but we're also wanting them to respect our boundaries. But equally, even if someone's got a brilliant idea, if it doesn't seem to work for us, then we have a right to speak out and articulate that. So it's not necessarily all a positive. It is a chance to discuss things for sure in a very lively way. But as the week goes on, and particularly from Wednesday, as the sun comes right to the end of its journey through Leo, that clash with Uranus becomes quite profound. So the sun's arrival back in Virgo after 11 months, Virgo very much about where things are routine, where they're ordered, where they're efficient. But it can also be with Uranus squaring up to the sun, maybe where we need to think again in terms of some of those strands. If things have become too workaday, or we're not really enjoying, we don't feel that sense of passion. It just seems there's a lot of demands and a lot of constraints. I feel for some people it could create a sense of stress if there is a lot of loading. And of course there's so much information buzzing around these days. That's not always good for our physical health either, which the sun in Virgo encourages us to try to find ways that we can be a bit more virtuous around. Depending on what we eat, drink, sleep, the amount of exercise we got, it's all up for some kind of renewal. But the new moon, or the black moon, why is that? It's the second new moon in the month of August. The first was in Leo, this one in Virgo. Now all full moons are technically black moons. You might see them in certain parts of the world, but for most of us we don't. However, this one, because of the square to Uranus, really intriguing, because Uranus in Gemini is speeding things up in terms of communications. But that doesn't necessarily mean that that's a good thing. The sign of Virgo wants to know what we can achieve tangibly from situations. So we shouldn't be rushed about anything. But if we are feeling that something we've been very dedicated around, we've applied ourselves the best we can, but it's just not given us any personal satisfaction and it's lost its luster, Uranus's energy about escapism and freedom is something we need to be mindful of, particularly if a job has become too dull and too constraining. So that's something that we're all going to be feeling as this week comes to a close with the new moon energy over the following month. So I think for some people there is going to be a need to do something different in terms of work, diet, health and fitness, and get more informed, and that can come from the information gatherer, which is Gemini. But in some ways things may happen quite edgy, in an edgy way. There could be sudden changes, demands, and that isn't necessarily going to make it an easy new moon. I'm going to now go through each of the 12 zodiac signs from Aries through to Pisces. So Aries, your week commencing the 18th of August forecast begins with a repetition of an aspect which is very empowering between Mercury the communicator and Mars your ruler, which occurred last Friday, but it's repeated on Monday. So you burst into this week with a lot of enthusiasm. If you something you want to share that you're inspired by, you're attracted to someone, they're going to find you very hard to resist. So that's absolutely delicious. But also the sun is forging a beautiful link to Chiron in your sign. If you have felt at times this year, particularly earlier in the year, with Saturn in your 12th house in a conjunction to Venus, that certain relationships have been hard going, or you haven't felt very heard by people close to you when Mars was in a square with Chiron, now you have an opportunity to feel much more self-assured. It's a great chance for you to reset your sense of identity in the most radiant of ways, because the sun is also in its third decan and therefore is picking up the sub-rulership of your ruler Mars. But it has to be said, Uranus has recently moved into a very electric, buzzy part of your chart, which can see your mind really having lots of sparkling ideas. But as the sun makes its way into the practical Virgo, on Friday, then with the black moon, the new moon on Saturday, squaring off to Uranus. If there is something that you're wanting to take that's been creative, that you've been trying to make progress with and box it into something more tangible, the sun's journey into Virgo gives you that opportunity over the next month. But if you're in a job which is rather too mundane, is not really keeping your interest, you feel it's a bit dull or repetitive, you may find yourself becoming a little bit resentful of the regularity of that as this week draws to a close. What attracts you often is a sense of drama and freshness, recreating your approach. But of course, with that freedom does come some responsibilities. And if those responsibilities are a bit too workaday, by the end of this week and with that new moon, you could find yourself checking out whether you need to make some changes, particularly around your work or the way you organise your domestic situation. And if there is someone who tends to be too dependent on you at home, you may find yourself being much more outspoken towards them as this week draws to a close. Taurus, your week commencing the 18th of August forecast sees your ruler Venus in the part of your chart very much to do with the expression of ideas, forging a beautiful link to the North Node in the sign of Pisces. Trust your instincts when it comes to saying how you feel. And with the planet of communication, Mercury, gaining traction in quite a sensitive part of your chart, but forging a practical link with Mars, if you are wanting to bring people with you, perhaps at home with a tidy up, a declutter, making some physical changes, your enthusiasm can really be infectious. But later this week, the sun on Friday makes its way into one of the best parts of your chart. The following 4 weeks can really give you a lot of encouragement to showcase what makes your talents, creativity and flair so special. If you are someone who enjoys performance or taking in bands or plays, or you are an artist, you can really shine brightly. If you're someone who just enjoys really socializing with people, that part of your situation can also build up speed as well. What's not to like? Well, you may find yourself that part of you, many Tauran people have a very strong appreciation of natural things or perhaps luxurious things, and whatever your particular taste is, you may find yourself being a bit more impulsive as this week draws to a close, because there is a new moon in the sign of Virgo on Saturday, which really gives you a lot of support to really feel much more optimistic and outgoing and interactive with others. But it does square up with Uranus. Uranus is darted into the part of your chart to do with your finances, to do with your values, but also to do with the foundations in your world. And maybe something that's been quite steady for some while is up in the air just now because you're re-evaluating or actually pushing to do something different. If you're someone who enjoys a punt, a bit of speculation, Uranus is square with the sun, could give you a lot of instinct to go for it, but it can also make us perhaps a little bit too much in a hurry. So if you're someone who likes to weigh the odds up, be a bit more cautious, try not to get too caught up with the urgency that Uranus can bring. But it could also see you being a bit more daring around your love life. And if someone has the kind of physical attributes that you're drawn to, whether it's in terms of how they dress, how they look, perhaps the type of car they drive, you may find someone quite irresistible. But whether it would be a fleeting connection or something longer lasting does remain to be seen. Gemini, your week commencing the 18th of August forecast sees your ruler Mercury picking up speed and traction in the sign of Leo, which for you is going to help you to animate your ideas with extra confidence. But Mercury's link to Mars gives you extra drive and passion with those ideas. If you are chatting to someone you like, they're going to find you very hard to resist. But if there are particular strands and more creative ideas you have, your ability to enthuse people and engage them is certainly turned up to max. But there is a bit of a paradox with this week, Gemini, because as it goes on, the sun moves into the part of your chart that's more to do with reflection and quiet, and can be a part of the year where more home-based and family interests can come up more strongly. But this year, just as the sun approaches the sign of Virgo, he starts to clash with the newly arrived Uranus in your sign. Now that's a very restless influence. If there is anything around your living situation at the moment which you're finding rather cramped or stifling, or you're not really enjoying the particular location, you could find yourself wanting to make an alteration, particularly on the back of the new moon which occurs on Saturday. So for some Geminis, although there is this buzzy, effervescent, sparkling energy at the start of the week, it's much more to do with how you feel about things towards the end of the week, and where you may feel cramped or hemmed in or not really feeling very fulfilled, even in some close family ties. If you don't feel that you're getting back what you're giving out to others, you don't feel that you're getting as much attention, that the lack of nurture could be something that you want to rebel against, and you may find yourself breaking down some relationships that may have been with you for some while over the following month of the new moon period, because there's part of you that wants to recreate the home base of your situation, which can be a physical base, but it can also be what lies inside of us. It's our emotional base, and you may find yourself a lot more rebel rousing and prepared to push back and perhaps upset the proverbial apple cart, because at the end of the day, Uranus can be a disruptor as well as an innovator. So Cancer, your week commencing the 18th of August can see you grappling with your financial situation, or perhaps how you feel about your value, where you're directing your energies. Is it appreciated, but are you also appreciating what you're doing? And with the energy of Mars in a more emotional sector linking very well with Mercury, if you do need to add action to your thinking, particularly around where you're located, or making some physical changes to your home, or perhaps thinking of starting a business from your residency, the motivation to try to achieve that is very strong. Now, as this week goes on, the pace of life is set to considerably pick up, with the sun moving into the practical, precise sign of Virgo. For you, this represents house 3. So although Virgo is ruled by Mercury, it is about precision, analysis, and achieving things in a tangible way, which gives us some practical benefits. The other sign that's ruled by Mercury is Gemini. And ironically, as this week goes on, Uranus newly arrived in Gemini, which is teasing into the open perhaps some more subconscious strands that have been simmering away deep within you. Well, that links with the sun and then with the new moon of Saturday. Don't be surprised if you have some very lively discussions over the next 4 weeks. You may find it very hard to sit on your hands. I think you're going to perhaps want to move around quite a bit, perhaps be more active. But there may also be an issue that you've been a little bit reluctant to look at, which could burst into the open. It may be about a sibling, it could be about a neighbour, it could be a little bit of gossip, to be honest, because the Uranus position in house 12, that's said in traditional astrology to be hidden enemies. The third house can be quick exchanges of information, but can be a bit gossipy. So unfortunately, someone could tell you something over the next 4 weeks which you're not expecting, but equally you may fess up about something that you've been thinking very deeply about. You know that not everyone may necessarily agree with what you're going to say, but if you feel that your world in terms of your everyday life and the stimulation or lack of in it isn't quite working for you, I think it is an opportunity to make a change, but it could be a change which at some levels does feel a little bit disruptive. Leo, your week commencing the 18th of August forecast suggests that a project that's meant a lot to you that hasn't quite got going in the way you would have hoped could really start to sparkle this week. But what people are going to find very hard to resist is the way that you impart your ideas. And the exciting thing between the link between Mercury and Mars is you can come across in a way which enthuses people, but also they can buy in, they can actually believe that what you have to offer can really work. That can be a really infectious vibe. But later in the week, the Sun makes the transition from your sign to Virgo. Every year when this happens, for us all collectively, it's a chance to take the more creative, artistic energies of your sign and then make them much more structured through the energy of Virgo, which can be more to do with order and precision. And that could be something that shows up for you later this week. But there's an interesting dimension this year that we haven't had in our lifetimes, because Uranus, newly arrived in your sector of friendship, is clashing with the Sun as the week goes on, and that becomes exact on the new moon, the black moon, which occurs on Saturday. So ordinarily you'd be setting your intentions to improve anything to do with income, perhaps a sense of comfortability or security, stability. Just really set your intentions around that, and that's still possible. But you may find that something comes up towards the end of this week or even over the next month which could give you a major choice to make, and it may require quite a quick decision. It possibly could be about money or a career. Maybe it's linked to people you already know, maybe not. A group situation where you don't align with people, you don't have the same values, that could run into some stress and choppiness, to be honest. But if you're someone who is collaborating with people who share your values, you have a clear understanding of who does what, thinking outside the box about how you use your money, your talents, your ideas, that actually can be something that can bring some very exciting, but as I say, unexpected developments over the next 4 weeks. So Virgo, your week commencing the 18th of August sees your ruler Mercury gaining speed, but still in the sheltered 12th house. 12th house position for Mercury can be challenging because it can be a bit dreamy. The host is the proud Leo. It's possible that someone may have been somewhat of a disappointment recently. At the very least, there could have been some mix-ups and communications, but someone may not have quite owned that as much as they could have done. In a more constructive way, Mercury's retrograde in your 12th house has given you the chance to do some deep research or thinking, take soundings, really weigh up your options. And if you are wanting to use your resources in a bit of a different way, Mercury's link with Mars in the early part of this week can see you take a very decisive step forwards. But as the week goes on, the Sun, inching towards your sign on Friday, does start to forge a chafing, abrasive right angle with Uranus. And Uranus has moved right to the top of your chart. Now, the 10th house is our connection to the world at large. It can be about our work. Uranus can be a disruptor, it can be about change, but it can be about innovation. But also, since the 19th of November last year, Pluto, the planet of transformation, has been in your sector of practicalities, the 6th house, which has a kind of echo of the energy of Virgo. It's your preference for things to be to know where you stand, to have some kind of shape to how you approach things. So these two things, Pluto in Aquarius and Uranus in Gemini, they're speaking to each other, and also you have Saturn and Neptune together in your 8th house, shared resources and finance. So I feel as the Sun steps into your sign, one of the great things about it is it can give you more confidence to move away from any disappointments, particularly if you feel someone hasn't been as particularly as truthful, hasn't shown the integrity you would like, perhaps being downright disappointing. But you can move into the moment, take a firmer grip on your life direction. Your physical drive is going to improve. You have the new moon, which occurs on Saturday, the black moon in your sign, a great chance to thrust forwards in a very dynamic, purposeful way. And if you need to be more single-minded, so be it. But you can't change the fact that the Sun is clashing very tensely with Uranus on that new moon. And if you're not happy in your work, it's definitely going to show up over the next 4 weeks. Maybe it's because you feel that what's expected of you keeps changing. Maybe it's because you're a natural bohemian and you're trying to fit into some kind of corporate structure, which is not really you. Maybe it's because something you've done for a long time and done it well has lost a little bit of its sparkle, because Uranus in the 10th house is asking you in a way to reinvent your connection to the wider world, to update it with some more modern approaches. But also that position of Pluto cannot be underestimated. So essentially the Sun is in a quincunx with Pluto, and there may be some kind of power dynamic, maybe between that part of you that wants to be of service and the part of you that wants to focus on what you've got to offer as an individual. So as you go into this new moon season, very exciting. I think you can be philosophical about some people who've let you down. You can move forwards in making the most of the research you've done around your financial affairs. But I think when it comes to anything ongoing, if your creativity, flair or individual personality is in any way being thwarted, there is going to be a serious push by the heavens to ask you to consider some kind of change to your worldly situation. So Libra, your week commencing the 18th of August forecast has something of a split dimension to it, and it's quite polarized. On one hand, certain relationships can really give you a real uplift, and that's partly because a brilliant angle between Mars in your sign and Mercury in your sector of networks is repeated from last week. Now, if you're right at the heart of things or feel very involved in any kind of collaborative way, you can really show all your talents when it comes to working in this way. Also, Chiron in your sector of relating, which is a magical link to the Sun. Again, this can be a chance to celebrate the things we have in common with others. It could also mean that you meet someone new socially who really does capture your imagination. But then on Friday, the Sun makes its annual visit to the more reflective part of your chart. Over the next month, you may find yourself wanting to step back a little bit, have some moments of peace and tranquility. If you're interested in things like meditation, healing, retreats, being by water, immersing yourself in a spa day, all of those can take on added appeal. But of course, that's much more withdrawn than the bubbly, outgoing energy of Leo. So it's possible with Uranus in your fellow air sign of Gemini is going to make you much more conscious of an issue that's very important to you around the philosophy. It could be a point of principle around someone being truthful or not. And because it clashes with the black moon, the new moon on Saturday, the next month means that however positive certain alliances feel in the early parts of this week, over the next month, you could find that not everyone you hoped was necessarily quite as sincere as you may imagine. So it's important to be a little bit protective this week and not too open with information of a more confidential kind. There may be someone circling around you who will only be too happy to seize on a snippet, and as ever in these situations, once the story is retold, it's never quite as accurate as the actual facts. So Scorpio, your week commencing the 18th of August forecast continues to see your ruler dive in deep in your 12th house, which can stir up a lot of sediment. Sometimes that can make us very emotional, at other times rather angry. But just like the end of last week, Mars forges an incredibly powerful link to Mercury, the communicator. If you dive deep into your past experiences and knowledge, there may be something that you can share with someone in a position of influence that they're going to be really intrigued by. It could be that you're going to repurpose an existing skill or past experience in a fresh way. It may be that you're going to reconnect to someone you used to work with. Because Chiron's in the part of your chart to do with your physical well-being, your life structure and the order of your life. Its link to the sun suggests that as long as you know your limits and you don't overpromise, people can be impressed by what you've got to offer. But it's going to be how you connect to people over the month following the end of this week, which will be really important to your ambitions. Because sometimes it's not just about what we know, the skills we have, it's how we're perceived, whether we can be a team player, whether we're going to be in an environment which is very nurturing for us. Interestingly, if there is someone around you that you found a friend to be a little bit too possessive or clingy, that could come up over the next month, and a relationship that may have been part of your life for some while could be tested. It may require you and the other person to have some very frank discussions, but it also may require both of you to observe but also share in a very honest way perhaps what your needs are. But I think that part of you that can dislike it if you feel that anyone's trying to control you could come up quite strongly as this week draws to a close and over the next month. Sagittarius, your week commencing the 18th of August begins in dramatic fashion with a repetition of an angle between Mars, the planet of assertion and action, in the part of your chart to do with friendship and your long-term planning, linking to Mercury, the communicator, in your 9th house. If you're heading off somewhere with a group of friends at the start of this week, it can be truly a blast. But for some archers, I do feel that you're going to be thinking about your work and career, particularly as the week goes on. If you feel a bit hemmed in with what you do, if it's rather mundane, you don't really enjoy the atmosphere, that's coming up with the moon's T-square to the nodal axis at the start of this week, or you don't feel it's very reciprocal in terms of what you give and get, a much more independent side of your nature around your work can certainly manifest itself as this week draws to a close. The black moon, the new moon which occurs on Saturday, is though in a crunching right angle with the provocative Uranus. There could be sudden tension, particularly if you have a line manager or you work in an organisation which is pretty orthodox and expects things to be done in a particular way. A much more free-spirited part of your nature, even around how you earn money, is definitely going to show itself up in the next month. And if you've ever considered self-employment or you're a natural bohemian, this is definitely a time when you could consider a big change about what you do to earn a living. Capricorn, your week commencing the 18th of August begins with Mars, the planet of desire, in a very visible part of your situation, urging you to show maximum self-confidence when it comes to your goals and ambitions. But it's linking to Mercury, the planet of business, in your 8th house. Whether you're discussing long-term finances, shared resources, property matters, or a business affair, you can just cut through, but also take the action in a confident way to take a giant step towards your goals. But however much you can be someone who's perceived as being very redoubtable, reliable and hard-working, everybody occasionally needs to be a bit more free-spirited. And towards the end of this week, if you have been resenting certain chores and obligations of late, ever since Uranus moved into your sector of responsibilities, then it's possible as the black moon, the new moon on Saturday in your sister Earth sign of Virgo, squares off with Uranus, that suddenly you can be much more determined to liberate yourself from something that just seems to be very limiting, very dull, or where someone is perhaps taking you for granted where you have been so patiently applied in the past. So it's an interesting week. You could have that major breakthrough at the start of this week, but a very different part of your nature can come up towards the end of it. If you can do something completely off the cuff, travel somewhere, get with a group of friends who perhaps a little bit more rebel rousers, that will be very good for your soul. A change really can be as good as a rest as this week draws to a close. Aquarius, your week commencing sing the 18th of August suggests the duality of your sign can really shine brightly this week. What do I mean? Well, Uranus, your modern ruler, is very much about being independent, very visionary, perhaps even a little quirky, but most of all very innovative. Your traditional ruler, Saturn, however, gives you an appreciation of customs and the way things have been in the past, but you can blend your thinking and the way you structure your ideas to suit your audience, which can make people receptive. And if you have been encountering some delays over communication, as Mars links to Mercury on Monday, suddenly news can be heard and things can speed up. But intriguingly, as this week goes on, particularly if you've met someone romantically recently, the sun dives deep into the 8th house, which can be very passionate. If you're lucky enough to have a relationship which is showing real signs of promise, it could be a time when you get more intimate with one another and more invested, but not just in terms of the physical context. For example, sharing resources, perhaps planning a future, perhaps even thinking about a property or business matter together. But with the sun's arrival in Virgo, that can have a psychological dimension. It can be a time of great transformation. Sometimes we get more into a situation, sometimes we want to bring it to a close. And because the black moon of Virgo on Saturday clashes with your modern ruler, if you do feel that something you've tried your absolute hardest with, really put every ounce of effort into, is still not serving your greater good, you may decide over the next month that you will need to go that more independent route that can be part of your nature, even if you will try, be very hard working and applied very much like a Capricorn through that energy of Saturn. But once you reach that point where you just don't feel it will prosper, that's when that more freedom loving dynamic of Uranus can show up, and that could be the case as this week comes to a close. So Pisces, your week commencing the 18th of August is going to see a black moon in your opposite sign. 7th house new moons are really exciting for relationships. So as the week draws to a close, you could find yourself really optimistic about what you can achieve, setting your intentions, particularly if you'd like to bring more romantic interaction into your world. But do you know, Uranus, the planet of change, the planet of restlessness, the planet of disruption, is going to forge a square to this particular new moon. So even around existing relationships, things could get a little edgy and abrasive over the next month. It's going to be important to work hard at sharpening up your listening skills. That's not to say you're not good at it at the moment, but I think we can all drift off into our own worlds at times. So this is your chance to just really be much more conscious of how the other person feels. It could be a parent, it could be a friend, it may be a neighbour, a colleague. It doesn't have to be only in a romantic context. But also the 7th house can be where we set our boundary, where we won't agree to do something we don't enjoy. And if there is someone close to you who tends to be a little bit unpredictable and demanding, then push back over the next few weeks, because that will be good for them, but mostly it will be very good for you. Also, the new moon in your 7th house can make you more combative. If you do need to be more competitive and assert the best of yourself, then go for it. You have a great opportunity to do this, but Uranus is basically saying if things do get a little unsettled or edgy, that will be part of the process, but it's where you're heading that's really important, Pisces, not necessarily where the whole scenario starts out.